Today on Real Money, we're talking about short-term rentals. I get all kinds of questions from clients regularly about getting into real estate, how they should get into real estate. And if short-term rentals has been something that's been on your mind or your heart, you've got to listen to this conversation. On this episode of Real Money today, I have Parker Barofsky. No, Parker Barofsky. I did say that right. Oh, I said it right. On this episode of Real Money, I have Parker Barofsky. Parker is a real estate lender with Movement Mortgage, but there's so much more to Parker in this conversation than just that. She's a superstar in lending, and she also owns 12 of her own short-term rentals. In this episode, we talk about how she got started with her first property, what to look for in buying your first property, how to assess whether or not that property could be the right fit for you, and then how to grow. If you're a woman who's looking for a trustworthy, down-to-earth, low-key conversation that's going to help you get started with short-term rentals or real estate in general, be sure that you listen into my conversation with Parker today. So Parker, we were introduced by our media team. You work with the same media team that I do, and I am really excited for this conversation because I coach and mentor a lot of women who have a lot of interest in real estate and want to learn how to start investing in real estate, and short-term rentals come up all the time.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I do see you as an expert in this space, not just as a lender, but also because you have, what did you say, 12 short-term rentals of your own?
We do.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Can we start with the beginning of your journey in real estate? Women, Josh Cadillac and I had a conversation about this. I know I think you were just on his show, but women dominate the real estate space.
Yeah.
When you got into real estate, was that the case with where
Yeah.
you were?
I think, when we talk about women dominating, I have noticed, especially on the, agent side, the real estate agent, and in mortgage as well, it tends to be a space where women seem to thrive and do really well. So it's been exciting to see. Most of the top performers are typically women. There's some men sprinkled in there too. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting industry in that respect.
What made you decide to go into real estate?
That's a really good question. So I actually, after graduating back in, 2001, so old, um, I landed in timeshare marketing
Okay.
for about 10 years. And I'm from San Antonio mostly, and then traveled a few places, was married with two babies. My husband, who's an electronic engineer, was like stay-at-home dad, but a really good one, just because we kept moving around for my job. So when we landed in Tennessee, he was able to get an electronic engineering job at a big manufacturing plant. And that allowed me to explore other options.
Mm.
And so we just bought a house, and that whole process just seemed really interesting to me on both ends, the real estate side and the mortgage side. So that was the route I decided to go. And I was interviewed actually at my loan officer. She got me an interview after closing, of course, at the company she worked for. And it was actually really neat. It's kind of a full circle story. So I didn't know at the time, but the owner of that mortgage company was the father of a high level vice president I had worked for at Wyndham in timeshare.
Oh,
So it really, and it just seemed very serendipitous at the time. So that's
so
how I
you
got into lending.
okay. You jumped straight
Yeah,
into lending.
yeah, went straight into lending. And then what was really interesting to me, though, about lending and going through that process, and I think this is something I really want to encourage everybody, especially women, to think of. We do the 20-hour course, and then it teaches you all the rules and all the regulations. And so coming out of it, I thought, well, okay, these are the rules. This is what I have to stick to. And I quickly found out that it's not really the case. Like there's a lot of gray area in there. There's a lot of debt to income ratio wiggle room. And so I learned very quickly from another woman in the business
Mm.
that things aren't always what they seem. And so I think that's what really gave me my first edge. I'm a very solution oriented person. So if something makes sense or a situation makes sense, but just doesn't match on paper, I'm usually
Yeah.
pretty good at figuring out a way to make it happen. So,
Was that was before the 2008 crash? Was that
oh no,
before the 2008 crash? After?
yes, this was just back in 2014, 2015 was when I
Gotcha.
started. Yes, yeah. So, um, so long after, so there were different rules and regulations in place. I wasn't part of the craziness back in the
Yeah.
day.
What are some
But
of
yes,
those gray areas?
so they'll teach you things like 43% debt to income ratio is the max. That's what the
Mhm.
guidelines say. But really, when you run it through the Fannie Freddie software, there's a tolerance up to 50% debt to income
Mm.
ratio in most scenarios. With the VA loans, so VA is really interesting. It caps you at 41% in the written guidelines. But see, that's where you just have to dig a little deeper. I've gotten a VA approval up to like 65% debt to income ratio. It's
Whoa.
crazy. Yeah, so it's just a matter of trying and running it through the system, which is this algorithm that the agencies have put together. So yeah, so it's just being able to see things like that and think outside the box and not necessarily follow the written guidelines.
So as the lender, someone comes to you, what I think I'm hearing you say, someone comes to you, they're wanting to qualify for a property, you're taking in the information, you're running it through the software, and then you're also negotiating with the underwriter of the loan?
Yes, so it does have to, there's not a, if it doesn't pass through the software because it's Fannie, Freddie backed or VA, there's
Mm-hmm.
not really negotiating I can do. We can play with it though and see if we can get the system to like it. But where it comes into negotiating with the underwriter, that's another good point that not every loan originator does. That's where, so when people try to calculate their own debt to income ratio, I really encourage them not to,
Hmm.
because there's so many caveats. So, for example, bonus income. We're supposed to average bonus income over the last 2 years. Well, and this is where the underwriter comes into play. Let's say maybe 2 years ago, you were in a different position, so your
Mm-hmm.
bonus was lower. You got a promotion. And so the most recent year, your bonus was significantly higher. As long as we kind of approach that the right way and document it well, then I should be able to just use that most recent year's bonus versus the average.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I love that. I love that so much because for me, especially as a young woman in my 20s buying my first home, lending felt so it felt so inaccessible about why decisions were being made. It was basically like, here, just give us all your information. And I was too young, and I think I didn't have the confidence to ask questions. I was like, okay, hopefully I'll get approved. It feels very scary. But having a lender like you and a team that knows how to navigate these things, what I try to tell my clients all the time is go establish a relationship with a lender, go ask questions and work with someone who's going to explain these things to you. And it sounds like you and your team do that. That's amazing.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, and just know if something doesn't feel right in lending, if you feel like you should qualify and you're passionate about it, talk to a few different loan officers. I've had a couple clients now that I've closed 20 properties with, and they'll tell me when I first came to one of them, I was the 20th lender they talked to, and nobody else
Hmm.
could qualify them. Uh, Another one I talked to 4 or 5. So, if in your gut you feel that you should really qualify and somebody's telling you don't, just keep asking.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's really great. That's really great advice. When you got in, so you went from timeshares, which is a totally different kind of world.
Right.
And before we
Marketing,
hopped on, huh?
marketing, not sales. There's a big difference there. I couldn't do the timeshare sales bit.
Okay, okay, you did marketing, timeshares
Yeah.
marketing. And then you said you had done a stint with Amway. I think you had mentioned that before we hopped on.
Yeah.
What did you know about money before you got, or like stepping into the lending world?
I probably didn't know anything formal necessarily about money, but I think I've always been pretty good with money. I've always found ways to make it, whether it was cocktail waitressing at a comedy club, finding ways to maximize the amount of money I make for the position and the hours I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always been very good about not overspending. So I think I'm just naturally pretty conservative with money. I've always wanted to feel independent with it and not be
Mm-hmm.
trapped by it. And so I'm sure there's some other better things I could do with my money, but I think for the most part, I've always been lived below our means.
Okay.
So
Okay. Pretty savvy advice. So getting into the lending industry, knowing now you own 12 short-term rental properties and you're can I share the numbers? Because you shared them with me. Would that be all right?
yeah, yeah.
Totaling $1 million in revenue and a $350,000 net. Did you ever in a million years believe that you could experience that kind of success starting in the lending industry?
Never. No, never. Yeah. Yeah. To this day, I think to myself, how did I get here?
How did you get here?
Yeah.
Can we start with that? Can we talk about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So you get
So,
into lending. Yeah, you get into lending. You're learning a lot. You're starting to see the gray area and how you're able to help clients get through this process. What did that mean for you and your husband?
so that was great. Sometimes it's difficult to get kind of a foothold when you start lending. But I like to think outside the box. So I got licensed in a few other states. That way I wasn't just competing in my own
Okay.
city. But I did come across, I was introduced to a client by the name of Avery Carl, who's another
Oh
powerful
yeah.
one.
I was
Avery?
on Avery's show.
Oh, okay, awesome. Well, I was her original lender. And
Got it.
so, yeah, so I financed their second cabin and then the rest of their Smoky Mountain properties. And she was just in marketing at the time. She was marketing in Nashville. And she became an agent after that second cabin they purchased.
Okay.
And then she started getting friends, family, people started getting interested. They started teaching them how to do it. And I was the go to lender. And so we would have repeat clients. And I started actually seeing that income on the bank statements from Airbnb. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I could calculate the payment versus the income coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And so about a year and a half after I started doing a lot of those loans, I decided we need to do this. Why not? We'd be crazy not to. And so in 2018, the beginning of the year, we purchased our first. By the end of the year, we had two more. Um, and then it catapulted from there. And this is where I also like to encourage clients. So there's a lot of misinformation out there too about what you need to get started and purchase.
Yep.
So you can as long as your debt to income ratio qualifies, you can do a 10% down second home loan, as long as you do actually intend on using the property yourself, one or
So
two times a year as well.
what does that mean? What I'm sorry, you cut out 10-10.
Oh, a 10% down.
Oh, 10% down. Got it.
Correct. Yeah. So I think a lot of people think that they need 20% down or more even to
Mm-hmm.
buy a short term rental. But depending on your uh, intentions, you can do as little as 10% down on a second home.
Okay.
And most of these are in destinations we do intend to use ourselves as well. If you're buying a beach house or a mountain house, chances are you also want to go there to vacation yourself a couple
Right.
times a year. So you can purchase that way. And even if you did investment occupancy, it's only 15% down if you
Okay.
stay in that conventional loan range.
How
So, yeah.
how did you and your husband, what did you do to be able to decide that you were going to jump in on the first one? What were you looking for? What numbers did you crunch?
So in this case, we live near the Smoky Mountains and I had been financing. So I was pretty familiar with the revenues that came in.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to this isn't anything I have officially designed. Maybe I should, the Parker method. It's just a really simple, basic, we did a little bit of looking online to see what other people were charging per night, what their occupancy was, and then having some of that knowledge ourselves. Being in timeshare actually helped a little bit because a lot of great short-term rental markets are also great timeshare markets. So familiar with kind of that seasonality
Mm.
and the flow of guests.
Okay.
So I did, again, I'm really conservative when I do those calculations as well. I'm like, okay, what's my worst case that I'm okay with? And then
Mm-hmm.
if I feel like that's below what's reasonable, then I'm fine with it. And
And
so, yeah,
that means like how much profit you'll be able to make, or loan to value equation. What is it that you're looking at that you're going to be okay?
so on that, I'll take what I think I'll get an average daily rate or an ADR,
Mm-hmm.
multiply that by the number of days based on percent of occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
So frequently in the Smokies, occupancy is between 80 and 90%, but I'll run my numbers at 70, and
Gotcha.
I'll run a little bit lower than what I think the actual ADR is going to be and see where that number lands. And yeah, I look at profitability. How much is this going to generate? And am I okay working like this for this income?
Gotcha.
Now that did look very different back in 2018 than it does today. So I do encourage. There's a few ways to do it, and there's a few great masterminds. I'm always happy to help people calculate as well. You can use, and I do always recommend though several data sources. So
Mm-hmm.
AirDNA is a really great source to run numbers, but I would back that up with a secondary. Maybe STR Insights is another great website to see where numbers land. And I really also encourage people to check with if they can find somebody who owns in that area
Mm-hmm.
to see what they're doing realistically. Um, and
What's
then also
changed?
to, uh
What's
oh,
changed since 2018?
so purchase prices have increased significantly. And then of course, interest rates now have increased. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so those two things have made the margins smaller, but
Mm-hmm.
still well worth it.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
So step number one, identify an area. This is what I think I'm hearing you say. Step number one is identify an area that you can see yourself wanting to visit also, right?
It could
Potentially
be,
to
sure.
be able to
Uh-huh.
do that 10% down.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then run the numbers looking at ADR, which is average daily rental
Average daily rate.
rate.
Uh-huh.
Okay, average daily
Yep.
rate. I'm not taking notes on this. So,
It's okay.
um, and then from there, look at the margins. And you're conservatively saying 70%.
Well, it depends on the market. In the
Okay.
Smokies, 70% occupancy rate. So take
Hmm.
365 days times 70% and use that times your estimated average daily rate. And that should give you your annual income.
Gotcha.
Yep. And then from there, I'll divide that by 12 months to see what that average monthly is going to look like. And then I'll take the mortgage payment plus get an idea of what utilities might be for that market, any HOA dues if you
Hmm.
purchase a condo, and kind of compare. Okay, here's my monthly income that I should get conservatively. Here's where my expenses should be. Where's my delta, and is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Is it worth it a personal decision?
Yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
There are some. So we own a couple in Florida as well. So that cash flow and those margins are smaller than the Smokies
Hmm.
because the expenses are higher down there and they're seasonal.
Gotcha.
So, but down in Florida, I feel like since we're close to the coast, there's a little bit more of an equity play
Hmm.
as well. So it was a balance of the two. So we're still cash flowing, but that equity on top where that should grow just because of location alone
Gotcha.
is a big
Gotcha.
play. Mhm.
Do you do business coaching and mentoring with the people that are coming in and wanting to learn about short-term rentals also? Because there's a whole business side of it, making sure that you're managing your profits well, and that you're making sure you have enough money because you're the outright owner of these properties, even though you're Airbnb-ing them, making sure that you have money for repairs and those kinds of things. What kind of business coaching would you give someone that they also need to make sure not only is this going to be profitable for you, but there are some other things you need to make sure you think of?
Absolutely. So, on that aspect, I'm actually just starting to develop a little bit more. I have been doing unofficial coaching
Yeah.
with my clients, always happy to help them or answer questions as they navigate. A lot of them are part of communities where they can reach out and speak to others that are rental owners as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some that have masterminds and so forth. And so a lot of the clients I work with are getting support, but I'm always happy to give support as well, especially experience wise in lending. So,
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, so you have your first property, and then what conversations are you and your husband having about the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one? What's that look
so
like?
yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting is, and this happens. So I get a lot of clients that say, "Hey, we're going to buy one. We'll see how it goes. Maybe next year we'll buy another." But I already know they're going to get one. It's going to go awesome. They're going to see a lot of the bookings, and usually within about 3 or 4 months, they're calling for number two. And that's
Mm,
what happened with us as well. So we went in cautiously and got our first one up and going, and then the it started booking like crazy. It was a little easier then than it is now, just because of competition. I mean, then we could take cell phone pics, throw them up on Airbnb, and call it a day. Now we've
mm,
gotten professional pictures done. You know, you have to take a few more steps. But yeah, the rental income just started coming in. It was so easy, and so then we were like, okay, let's figure out how are we going to get number two and number three, which were 15% down payments.
mm-hmm.
So the first one we had savings. We were able to purchase that. The second one, we sold a rental we had back in San Antonio. It had been our primary that we had just turned into a long term rental. And so we sold that one, used those proceeds. And the third one, I did a 401k loan. I didn't pull it
Mm-hmm.
out, I just did a loan against our 401k. And that's how we got started with those first three. And then they just kept turning. And so let's see, that was 2018. So 2019, we didn't buy anything. And then in 2020, we accidentally found five. It
Sounds like your fifth kid. It was an accident.
was an accident. We didn't mean to find them.
It was a COVID baby.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay, so how did you accidentally find it?
So at that point, we were looking for a new primary home.
Mm-hmm.
We were living in Seymour, Tennessee, which is kind of between Knoxville and Pigeon Forge.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were looking, and we saw a 5 bedroom log cabin with two small studios on the same property on a river in Townsend, Tennessee, which was like 20 minutes from us. And so we're like, okay, well, let's go check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we got to the property, we realized that it was actually 4 different parcels, 6 houses available. We didn't have to buy them all that way, but they're in beautiful. So Townsend, Tennessee is like population 500. There's a river that runs through it. Tourists come and locals to the river. There's fishing. It's only 30 minutes from Pigeon Forge, so it's an extension of that tourism of the Smokies.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just totally fell in love with the property. Actually, not even the 5 bedroom lodge. It's a really kind of funky middle house that's on the river. Anyhow, so we said we've got to do this. The whole thing was 2.2 million, but because it was separated into parcels, so we did, let's see, two as investment occupancy, 15% down. We did our primary home, 5% down.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did end up doing a commercial loan on the 5 bedroom lodge and two studios because it was a little weird, with 20% down.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah.
Way to go for it.
Thanks.
So
Yes.
I work with a lot of women who have fear and anxiety around money. And then Dave Ramsey really hasn't helped the conversation about no debt, no debt, no debt, no debt.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say though is that when you run the math and when you look at the different margins and you look at the money that you will be making, because you're not gonna buy in a place for a short term rental where people aren't renting,
Right.
right?
Right.
Did you feel like as you were going through this process, was that really stretchy for you to look at at that point, a fifth property that was $2.2 million total? What was that like internally? For me, I think I'd be a little nervous. Actually, I'd be pretty nervous. Like, whew, that's big. That's a big lift.
Absolutely. I think it would have been more nerve wracking if I wasn't surrounded by all the investors and
Mm,
doing so many loans and seeing it. I will say, but it's always nerve wracking. Every time we buy a new property, I lose a couple nights of sleep. Like, what if it
mm-hmm,
doesn't work? What if it doesn't rent? So there are always the what ifs, even still.
mm-hmm,
But to this day, we've been fortunate. But this property, talk about, so we went under contract February of 20. And so 2 weeks before closing is when COVID hit, and nobody
mm.
knew, like, is this going to be bad? Is everything going to be shut down forever? We had no idea. So I said, well, I mean, we just really love this. It's an amazing property. There's a swinging bridge that goes right on our property that goes into town. I mean, it's really cool. So I said, well, let's go big or go home. If it
Mm.
all falls apart, it all falls apart. I didn't think it would. I just really saw a great opportunity. And this property alone generates about 500 gross revenue,
That's
the five
amazing.
houses here. Yeah. So
Amazing.
it worked out really well. But that's where I think you have to take some risk for the reward. But again, like I told you, I'm pretty conservative and I'm cautious.
Mm-hmm.
So smart risk, for anybody purchasing, research your market. I'm not a fan of metropolitan markets for a lot of reasons, but mostly because that's where, when you invest in a neighborhood where people live, they don't like that. And
No.
no, that's where they're going to go to their, city council and start complaining. And that's when ordinances come about. And that's when short term rentals become very restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to invest in an area that's not already a strong tourism market with a lot of short-term rentals for that reason.
That's a
I
great
just
point.
I don't want to deal with it.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so more questions. I'm so curious. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing so openly all the details.
Sure.
You have your lending company, so you're doing that, and then you have these 12 properties. Who's managing the properties?
So great question. My husband was actually able to quit his W-2 job about 3 years ago. We got to
Awesome.
that point. Yes. And so we both manage it. He handles all of we've done a couple renovations, and he handles guest challenges and maintenance, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I handle most of the guest communication, like the messaging,
Okay.
and here's something else I think a lot of people feel intimidated by, and this is something that's come a long way. So this process is so automated now with these property management systems. You can
Mm-hmm.
just set up automated messages. So, there are messages that go out a certain number of days before guests check in, after check in, check out instructions. I don't have to manually do that. They just go out. So the only thing I really have to manually do is answer random questions or things that aren't addressed in those
Gotcha.
messages. Mhm.
So it doesn't sound very overwhelming. It sounds very doable.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You hear that? I'm saying that to my audience. You hear that? It's doable. I think a lot of times it's our own mindset that gets us in the way of building something like you've built, and then making sure you have good credit. And I know what Avery teaches a lot about is making sure that you're planning financially for even just that first property. You know what you need for that first property, because once you get in and you're cash flowing, you can then have opportunity for the next one. And I think on the business savvy side, I always tell my clients, if you're going to have real estate properties for rentals, treat
Mhm.
those as if they were a business. Don't let it be your milking cow. Put it in a business structure, treat it as a business, and then that business just keeps making money for you. And what are your thoughts about that?
100%. Absolutely. That's the best way to think of
Mm-hmm.
these. It's funny they say don't get emotionally involved with your properties. I'm the worst at that. I do, but it's okay. And then we want to put more into them. So we probably
Mhm.
even put more than we need to into them, but that's just kind of a little bit of the hobby piece. But people can
Mhm.
certainly do it without. I recommend not being emotionally attached, but it's okay if you are, and it's okay to not be perfect. You know,
Yeah.
um, yeah, Avery's really good with her money, and she's very good with the strategy.
Yep.
I've always looked up to her for that. I've probably put a little bit more fluff into our properties, like I said, than she might, because she's probably smarter than I am when it comes to that. But it feels good.
Yep.
So
Hey, it's gotta feel good, and success is very individual.
yes,
It's gotta feel good. It's gotta feel right for you. It's gotta feel whole for you. Otherwise, why do it?
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you touched on something when you said the limiting mindset. I
Mhm.
think that's so important in so many ways, in general. So especially with these properties, I feel like one of the biggest barriers is people not understanding the lending aspect
Mhm.
and if they can qualify and what they qualify for. And I've seen people drive themselves nuts trying to figure out their debt to income ratio. I kind of feel it's like doing your taxes. You try to figure out your taxes by yourself, and then you realize you just need to talk to the professional
Yep.
to understand it. So, so I really encourage people to talk to, and I really specifically recommend a short-term rental specific lender or somebody who knows. If they have short-term rentals of their own, even better. But there's a lot of guidelines that go around short-term rentals that a lot of typical loan officers just wouldn't know because their day-to-day is primary home.
Yeah.
So they just don't play in those guidelines very often.
What are some of those guidelines?
How to count rental income is a great one. So once you purchase a short-term rental, a lot of times there are loan officers out there. I still don't know why they think this, but they think you have to have 2 years of rental income before it can
Mhm.
be counted, which is not the case. You actually you don't even need a full year. You just need one tax return filed with that showing on your rental
Mm.
schedule E.
That's
And
1
then,
year because it's one tax return.
correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep. But it doesn't even have to be a full year. So if you purchase a property in July, get some revenue going, that can potentially offset itself that following year. That can offset its own
Mhm.
payment. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, so there's some loan originators who won't understand that or how to use projected rental income on the property that's being purchased. If you're doing investment occupancy, if your debt to income ratio is a little bit high, we can actually, with that investment occupancy, use the projected rental income from that property to help offset.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's a really important point. No matter what kind of real estate you're looking to buy, work with a lender who knows about that particular type, that particular sector, because they're going to know
Yep.
those nuances about what it takes. So interview and look for the right lender.
Yes,
Shop
absolutely.
around. Just like
Yeah.
real estate agent, just like investment groups. You mentioned investment groups earlier. Can we
Mm-hmm.
touch on that?
Sure.
How does someone I I will say that I've had clients come to me who have not had great experiences in real estate investment groups or have been involved um, in their words schemes and lost money. So,
Okay.
without there's so much to know and be considerate of when you're going to be investing in real estate. What are some good groups that you would know this is going to be a good group to be involved with? What would people look for?
I think Facebook is great with those groups because those are free in
Hmm.
most cases. So you don't have to worry about, being taken for money. And then if you want to join the masterminds, moving from there, you can.
Hmm.
What I've found, at least in some of the masterminds I've been part of, is that it's not always about the person doing the mastermind necessarily. It's also just as, if not more important, has been the relationships
Hmm.
and working with others in there because there's some with experience in there as well. I would caution, to your point too, there's a lot of people out there, we call them new gurus, new gurus, new gurus.
Uh-huh. New ruse. Love that.
Yeah, yeah. Proclaiming to have the answers and know what they're doing, but maybe they really don't. I've seen that as well. So I do
Mm-hmm.
think it's important, and maybe it's not even so much of a focus on masterminds, but communities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would encourage people out there to look at the info and the value and what people are saying and question everything. I mean, I question
Yeah.
everything anyway. I rarely take anything at face value.
Yeah.
So that's what I would encourage those looking for real estate groups. And yeah, I don't know that it's worth a ton of money to get some of the
Right.
info that they need to get.
Right. It's the relationships. It could be the experience, but most importantly, make sure that you're with somebody who's doing what this is my best advice. Be with someone who's doing what you want to do and doing it successfully, and question the results. Right.
Yes.
So, working
Yeah.
with a lender, of course, they could come learn from you, work with you.
Yeah.
What other people should they have on their financial team? What people do you have on your financial team?
Specifically, when it comes to short term rentals, another great team member is a good CPA.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of reasons for that. One, of course, maximizing tax benefits, which there are many that come with short term rentals, more so than come with long term rentals.
Okay, good to know. I
Um,
didn't know that.
yeah, the biggest one is the bonus depreciation, the cost segregation that you can do on
Okay.
those. I have some clients that are doctors, lawyers, high income earners that do short term rentals mostly for the cost seg that they can do to offset their income.
Nice.
So that is a little bit on pause for a minute. So they did away with the cost seg, it's kind of diminishing. However, it's back in whichever bill, I can't remember the name of it, Freedom, Families Freedom, something right now.
Okay.
So hopefully that's coming back. Everybody's on pins and needles waiting to see if they pass that bill, because if they do, it does come back to 100%, which would be excellent. But
Yeah.
having a CPA who understands how to navigate that is excellent. And also, how to account for the rental income is huge. So there's Schedule C self-employment versus Schedule E rental income, or do you put it on a 1065, a
Mm-hmm.
partnership return, or an S corp? So working with a CPA who understands not only, of course, the tax implications, but also the lending implications
Right.
is a good tool.
So, a CPA, a good lender, anyone else that you would recommend that they have on their team, their
Um,
financial team?
well, probably an amazing coach like you
Oh,
to help them navigate what am I doing with my money side of it.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, a good financial planner to kind of help guide, what do you have? Where are the best pockets to invest this? Where are your best returns?
That's where I always start with my clients. So where I don't I'm not a financial planner anymore, but I complement the work that financial planners do. Similarly with lenders, I have these different relationships with clients to say, well, let's make sure that you're operating out of a vision first. Because
Nice.
financially, it might sound great to have 12 properties, but is that in your vision? Is that what you really want before you go down that path? Because with that, you're going to have to stretch outside of your comfort zone. If you've never done it before, it's going to stretch you outside your comfort zone. You're going to have to stretch outside of your comfort zone on income. You're going to
Mhm.
make more money. Are you ready to energetically receive that and handle that? You're going to have a lot of responsibility. So your husband left his W-2, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
he's still working, right? He's managing the properties. You're making sure that it's flowing. And also the one thing that I hear is that you're borrowing for these properties. You're not paying for these properties 100% outright.
Mm-mm.
So with every property, you're taking on the liability, and nervous system wide, energetically, people have to be ready for that kind of build and be able to sustain it.
Yeah,
So for me,
absolutely.
that's where the coaching comes in. Like, let's make sure you totally understand what you're doing. And for what you've done, you've just done it pretty slowly, is what it sounds like, one property at a time.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, but everything you said is true. It's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to want to put in the work that we do and handle the stupid guest questions. You're like, really? You're asking me that?
Yeah.
really don't know how to work the remote. Come on. Not everybody's going to want to be burdened with that. There are some options out there to do, you could hire a co-host or have somebody manage for you, but then that cuts into profits. And so then that would circle back to, okay, if you do that and alleviate yourself of that responsibility, are you okay now making this? Are they going to do it the same way you would? So, yeah, so there's that too. So no, I think that's an excellent approach and thought process, because it's so true.
Let's make sure it's in your vision. Let's make sure you know how to get into your first property and do it thoughtfully. Know what numbers you're looking at. There comes with some education. Aside from a lender, where can people go to get educated on this? I know Avery has got a great podcast and platform. Where else would you recommend?
So two of the big ones that I've been involved with, there's the Short Term Shop, Avery's group, and then also there's a group called Build Short Term Rental Wealth that's on Facebook, and that's another strong one as well. Have you met Bill?
No, I haven't met Bill yet.
Okay, he's part of the group too, but of T Market. So yeah, so Build Short Term Rental Wealth is another great resource, a good group that I would say I've pretty much vetted out as well. So, and again, just great connections and great people in there.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I know I had emailed you before the show with what I wanted to talk about, and you wrote back, you were like, listen, I'm really, really passionate about short-term rentals. I really want to talk about this. What about this gets you fired up in the morning? One, it's created, it sounds like some independence, financial independence for you and your husband. But what else about it? I have a primary female audience. What do you want them to hear about this type of investment, this type of market?
It's not just been financially beneficial for myself and my husband. I have so many clients who I've been able to see grow and become independent through this themselves. And what's really cool is there's so many different aspects you can take with it as well. So I have, and women, single women, married women, what's funny is, again, when you talked about being a woman dominated area, I see a lot of women really taking over here too. They may be leading the husband into this and telling him, honey, we've got to try this. But there's so many other aspects to it too. There's the design aspect, and you can go and I enjoy, the artistic part of it and turning it into something we love and are excited to share with others. So there's that aspect of it too. But I have seen what makes me passionate is just that opportunity and giving other individuals the empowerment to make money in a way they may not have understood before. A lot of clients do manage from a distance. We happen to be here in the Smokies, but we manage our Florida ones from a distance and have to rely on handymen and HVAC techs and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So that can be done too. So I'd hate for that to be a limiting belief, but most of the clients I work with don't live anywhere near their properties. So just helping people really understand that, and then building equity, which may not be as fast right now as it had been in the past, but those who bought in 2019, 2020, there was a lot of equity that came in those couple of years. So if they bought 3 or 4 properties, they're sitting on some really strong equity right now, which is a nice place to be.
That's amazing. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, you have 2 kids.
Yeah.
How young are they? Where are they now in life?
So my daughter's 18, about to graduate, and my son is 16, about to start driving.
Oh my gosh. My son's getting his license next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
He's my oldest. When you think about the legacy, 12 properties, are you done? Do you want more properties?
I think we're good.
Yeah.
12 is good for me. 12 is good. Maybe. I was going to say I never say never, but I'm not looking.
No, totally fine. What kind of legacy are your kids interested in doing this? Where do you see this heading for you and your family?
My daughter is not interested for whatever reason. She wants to pursue a medical path, and that's where she is now, which is totally fine. My son, on the other hand, he's more of that business minded soul, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
And so I do see, he's talked about going into mortgage or being a lawyer or something, but he's definitely more business minded. He wants to make money. That's
Yeah,
his goal.
I love that. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. Um, well, I had a question for you. I was thinking about, I totally lost it. It's gone. It'll come back to me.
No worries. I was going to say, and my son actually does help with he does actually answer. He's very good. In fact, I had to tell him not to be quite so professional because he sounded fake answering
Uh-huh.
guest questions. So he was just trying to overdo it a little bit. And I was like, no, just be real, son. You don't have to use fancy words when you
Right.
respond. So, but yeah, it's neat to see him take some ownership and get involved in that too.
Yeah, I love that. Where do you and your husband see yourselves in 10 years from now? What kind of life is this affording you?
By 10 years, I definitely, so what this has created is freedom. And when I say freedom, it means I don't have to do mortgage to
Hmm.
sustain where we are because of the revenue from our properties. But I love doing mortgage and I love helping others and I love getting them, helping them grow to the same position that we're in.
Hmm.
Um, but it has given me the freedom to not have to do this forever. And so I would hope in 10 years I would be done with lending or, maybe just doing it as a hobby for those that needed
Hmm.
me here and there. And, I was thinking about mindset the other day too. I mean, I would love to be living in the Caribbean somewhere. And I was thinking about it. I
Mm.
was like, why not? Why am I not there now? What's stopping me? So I'm still thinking this in my head. I'm like, surely I could having the internet, I could do mortgages. Like, why not? And
Yeah.
so why wait for 10 years?
Why wait? I think that's a
Have you
great
thought that?
way.
Am I crazy? Yeah.
No, why not? Why not? It's all those. Well, one, maybe you just haven't thought about it yet in that way. And that's where the power of great coaches come into play and great conversations like this is it's so thought provoking. It's like, you know so much more about this than I know. And then as a coach, it's my job to just keep asking questions. So why not? Maybe you
Why not?
just why not?
Yeah,
And I think a lot of it is just fear. And then for you, because you are so thoughtful, it's like, why don't you be deliberate about it?
absolutely. Yeah.
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 Did you take the money personality quiz before you hopped on?
I did.
Yeah. What's your money personality?
So I scored the same on two, which is CC and DD.
Ah, you are. You totally are. I love
Am
it.
I okay? What does that mean? What does that
Okay.
mean?
So there's five. There's the cheap chip, the spendthrift Sally, the avoider Alice, the delusional Delilah, and the overgenerous Olivia. And the CC part of you, the cheap chip tends to be the most sensible
Okay.
financially. Um, if they are truly a CC, very logical, reasonable with money.
Okay.
Um, they when they're not in their power or strength, they can come from scarcity and fear.
Okay.
And like pinching pennies is something like data analyzation. Pinching pennies is something that cheap chips do pretty easily.
Okay.
But when coming from scarcity and fear, a cheap chip will not make the investments that you've made. But because you've done your due diligence, you're comfortable with the risk. That's a very typical CC kind of move. Like, hey, I crunched the numbers. We looked at the math. This makes sense. We're not gonna take on too much risk. So making sure we're in that 70% window, which is much more conservative. That's a
Hmm.
very CC mindset.
Okay.
And
Nice.
also, CCs can not always be in a conversation of never enough. There'll never be enough money. We just want more and more and more, and they can hoard their money, and sometimes not to their advantage. Not saying that's you, but
Right.
that happens with a CC. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
can feel some of that too. And it's weird for me. It's not that there's never enough because I'm really not money. This might sound really weird. I'm not money motivated. Does that sound
Mm-mm.
weird?
Mm-mm.
Um, I am, when it comes to mortgage, I'm performance motivated. I want to be number one and I want to help a lot of people and the money will come.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the rentals, it's kind of a performance thing. It's like, okay, I want to do this really well. I want to do a great job. I want people to have great vacations and make smart financial moves. But at the same token, like I said, I'm kind of conservative and cautious. So I want to keep enough in the bank for emergencies. And if, this happens, and how much do you need to really just let go? And so that's where I think what you're saying, the never enough, at least from an aspect of, okay, when can I just really just breathe?
Yeah.
And,
So that's the CCDD dynamic. So
okay.
CC is sensible, thoughtful, careful, right? And the DD is the dreamer. The success, the value of success is in the DD, not the CC. You want to be number
Okay.
one. You could be competitive. You want to do what you do really well, but the experience part of life, enjoying life, living big part of life is the dreamer in you.
Nice.
Yeah. So sometimes you can't let the CC take away that dream for sometimes you just got to go for it. You got to balance that, living in the Caribbean, sometimes you just got to jump. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll crunch the numbers first.
Oh, definitely. Yes. You have to get the logistics down for that, for sure. Yeah. And maybe wait till my son graduates. He probably would hate us if we did that to him.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, I know, being a parent. My husband and I tease because we have a 13, almost 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and we're like, all right, just a few more years and then we're free.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Love you, kids. Love you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I learned a lot today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I learned a lot
Hmm.
from you as well.
Awesome. I started the show with a clear intention that I wanted to have guests on that were going to be open and vulnerable. And so sharing the details of it, of how you got started specifically, I know is super helpful for someone listening to this right now to say, okay, this is one thing that I can do and take action on. And for me, the one thing is that you can just start with 10% and find the first right property, and then go from there, and then find the right team to support you on that journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very possible. I do loans for all kinds of clients every day, all income statuses. Um, I've helped people with credit if they had little blips, needed to get there. So, yeah, I'd say if anybody's truly interested in short term rentals, there's a way. There's a way to do
Yeah.
it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that. There is a way, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything on your heart to share with the audience before we hop off today?
No, I'm really excited to share, and I hope this will inspire, some out there. And yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, you can find me on Facebook, or I do have a website, and our contact info is in there. So I work for Movement Mortgage. That's the
Mm-hmm.
company I work for, but we have our own group within Movement called Wealth Builders Mortgage Group.
Mm-hmm.
And so Wealth Builders Mortgage, it's a mouthful, wealthbuildersmortgage.com. If anybody has questions or wants to learn more, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer those.
Awesome. Thank you, Parker. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for being here today. I hope this conversation was super inspiring for you. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. And if you're looking to take the first step in my world, I know that you need to know your money personality. Join me on the adventure of knowing what your money personality is and how you can live your healthiest life financially. Do that today.